What's going on, guys? Today's video is going to be something a little bit different, but I hope you guys are going to like what I've got in store for you today. What we're going to be doing is we are going to be ranking every Tyson Fury performance in his entire professional career, going from his worst performance through to his best. But I'm going to do it in a little bit of a different way. So I'm actually going to go through the fights in order that they happened so that we don't give away the best and the worst fights straight away at the beginning of the video. So we're going to go through in order, starting from his pro debut all the way up to his most recent performance against Francis Ngannou. But I'm going to split them up basically into a D tier, a C tier, a B tier, an A tier, and finally an S tier, the top tier of Tyson Fury fights. Now, you guys know Tyson Fury used to be my favorite fighter. So I've seen a lot of these fights live. I've been following his career as it went along live since the John McDermott fight. But I've also gone back and refreshed my memory on quite a few of these in preparation to this video. But I want this to be a collaboration. So you guys let me know in the comments, which rankings do you agree with? Which rankings do you guys not agree with? Are there performances that you think I'm overrating, underrating? So just give me your thoughts on here as well. Which of these performances are your favorites? Which ones stood out to you in a good way, in a bad way? But I thought let's just make this a fun one. We've got the big fight coming up in a couple of weeks' time, Fury against Oleksandr Usyk. So let's get into it. So starting with Tyson Fury's pro debut, this was a fight which took place nearly 15 years ago now against Bella Johnyoshi. That was who he fought in his first professional fight. Now, Bella Johnyoshi, he beat him with a round 1 TKO. I've got to say, actually, I thought this fight was not a terrible performance at all from Tyson Fury. I think if you go back and watch this one, knowing what he goes on to do in the future, you can see a lot of the things that Tyson Fury actually does well. You can see his good combinations, his hand speed. Now, Johnyoshi wasn't the greatest fighter in the world, but the reality is Tyson Fury was only 20 years old when he made his debut as well, which a lot of people forget, especially in an era right now where you've got heavyweights that are making their pro debut in their 30s or close to their 30s, like Joe Joyce, like Fraser Clark, even Fabio Wardley. These guys, you know, are a lot older than Tyson Fury was, making his pro debut at the relatively young age of 20 years old. So I think when you put all of that into perspective, this first fight against Bella Johnyoshi, it's not a bad performance at all. I'm going to put it into the C tier because I don't want to overrate it too highly either, and I want to leave room to put his better performances up in the B and A and S tiers. But I think this was a solid debut from Tyson Fury, to be honest with you. The other note with this fight as well is it was on the undercard of Carl Froch against Jean Pascal. And he also actually, interestingly, had Rob McCracken in his corner in this fight. So Rob McCracken, obviously trainer of Carl Froch, but also trainer of Anthony Joshua. So he was actually in the corner for Tyson Fury's first pro fight. So an interesting bit of trivia there as well. Number 2, we have Tyson Fury's second professional fight against Marcel Zeller. Now, Marcel Zeller, if you guys didn't watch this fight, he was an interesting guy. His father, I believe, was either Scottish or half Scottish, and so he actually wore a kilt in this fight, which was kind of unusual. But he basically was a tough guy who got hit quite a lot. Tyson Fury teed off on him at will, and Tyson Fury looked good, to be honest. Zeller was a tough guy. He actually had a decent record at this time. He had something like 25 wins and 3 losses, 21. He had a very much a winning record, basically, at this point in time, and he was a tough guy, but Tyson Fury got him out of there in 3 rounds. He showcased good footwork, hand speed, combination, so I would put that in the C tier. All right, so Tyson Fury's third professional fight was against a guy by the name of Daniil Peretyatko. And excuse me if I'm butchering the pronunciations for some of these names, but the reality is Tyson Fury butchered this guy in the ring almost as badly as I'm butchering the pronunciation. This was a TKO in 2 rounds. There wasn't a lot of offense, it has to be said, coming back at Tyson from Peretyatko, but he did put in a good performance. You couldn't have really asked for much more than what he did in this fight. And so, and again, I'm putting that one in the C tier. Now, Tyson's fourth fight was against Lee Swaby. Now, this was where the opposition started to increase just a little bit, not massively, but it was just getting a little bit better at this point. And this, by the way, is also the fight, if you guys have seen the video, I'm sure a lot of you have, of Tyson Fury punching himself in the face. This Lee Swaby fight, his 4th professional fight, this is the one where it happens. So apart from that, basically this one I think goes in the C tier as well. These ones you can kind of all lump them together in the sense that Tyson, again, he's showing a lot of the things that he becomes known for later on in his career, his combinations, ability to move around the ring very well for a guy his size. Like, all of this stuff is there. Lee Swaby, like I say, a little bit better than some of his last opponents. Now, This next fight, I would say, to me, which was his 5th professional fight against Matthew Ellis, this is the first one that I'm going to put up in the B tier. This one goes in the B tier for me because it was a very destructive performance. 51 seconds is all it took for Tyson Fury to get Matthew Ellis out of there, and he really did showcase for me the fact that he has very fast hands, and I think early on, people started to criticize him because they said they didn't know how he could fight on the back foot. They didn't know how he would do when people start putting pressure on him. But I think people also underestimated how fast Tyson Fury's hands were. At one point in his career, he actually went by the nickname Too Fast Fury. So he was Tyson Too Fast Fury before he became the Gypsy King. And it was because he had really, and still does, have really fast hands for a guy his size. And you see that in the Matthew Ellis fight. Matthew Ellis got out of there very quickly. Now, number 6, Tyson Fury against Scott Belshaw. Now, in this fight, I would say this probably, again, another C-tier fight for Tyson Fury. The reason I have it below the Matthew Ellis fight is because Tyson Fury here, he did drop Belshaw twice in the first round, but I think you have to put it below a performance where he got the guy out of there in 51 seconds. But again, another early on impressive Tyson Fury performance where he showed he did have power, because if you remember, that was one of the knocks on him early on in his career. A lot of people said he didn't deserve to go to the Olympics like David Price because he didn't have power. But he showed here that he did. He showed against Matthew Ellis that he did. So I think a good C-tier performance from Tyson Fury. Now, for his 7th fight, rather, he faced Alexander Salazins. Now, this to me is probably the first Tyson Fury fight that I would put into the D tier. It wasn't an atrocious performance, but the reality is that his opponent actually had a poor record, worse record than some of the other guys he faced at this point in time. But the thing for this one, for me, there was a lot of holding in this fight. There was a lot of holding for Tyson Fury. It was his 7th professional fight, but I would say up to that point, through his first 7 fights, that one against Salazins was his worst performance to date. There was a lot of holding in that fight. It was kind of ugly. He did get the stoppage in round 3, but to me, that was his worst performance up to that point in time. And joining that one, but I'm actually going to put it above the Salazins fight, but joining that one in the D tier, one of Tyson Fury's most controversial fights, and you guys, I'm sure, have seen this one before, but the John McDermott fight, for me, was where I actually jumped on board with Tyson, because there was a lot of controversy surrounding this fight, if you guys aren't aware. Not only did John McDermott win the fight widely on some people's scorecards, he won it narrowly on the TV scorecards, but convincingly enough that when Tyson Fury actually got the verdict from the referee, 98-92, there was an enormous outcry. People were saying this fight was a robbery, that John McDermott should have beaten Tyson Fury, and in fact, he did. In my opinion, John McDermott did beat Tyson Fury in this fight. This was his first loss, so I've put this one in the D tier. The commentators, if you go back and watch this one on ITV, they were outraged at the scoring. They didn't understand it, but it turned out that, if you guys are not aware, the referee, Terry O'Connor, allegedly had a personal grudge against John McDermott, and I believe John McDermott's father as well. You guys can correct me about that in the comments, but I believe there was a grudge between the referee, Terry O'Connor, and John McDermott and his family, and the referee was actually the one who scored this fight. So he scored it 98-92 in favor of Tyson Fury, but it wasn't a good performance. John McDermott won this fight, in my opinion. But here's the reason why Tyson Fury deserves a lot of, I think, credit as well. When he took this fight, John McDermott was a seasoned professional. John McDermott was 25-6 at the time that this fight took place, whereas Tyson Fury was 7-0. So John McDermott actually had a huge gap in experience, and Tyson Fury, realistically at this point, was very much an unproven prospect. So even though he lost this fight, it was a huge step up in competition from his last fight, number one, or from any of his fights, number one. And number two, it was a very rough, very physical fight. It was the most that Tyson Fury had been hit at any point in his career. But I think because of the step up in competition, which John McDermott represented at that time, I think it was actually a, I don't want to say good performance, but I think you can give Tyson Fury a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here as well, just based off of the fact that he was really stepping up, and John McDermott was a big challenge at that point in his career. So then he moved on after the McDermott fight, which was very controversial. Most people at the time thought Tyson Fury lost that fight, and he fought in his 9th fight Tom Mrazek, a guy who he would go on to have a 6-round points decision victory over. Now, I'm putting this one at the bottom of the C tier because of the fact that it took place only 2 weeks after the John McDermott fight. So to Tyson's credit, not only did he get in there against John McDermott, but he got in there 2 weeks later and actually put himself back in the win column legitimately in this fight. Now, Mrazek, it has to be said, was a very poor opponent in terms of his record. He was like 4 wins and 1,000 losses, basically. Not 1,000 losses. He was 4 wins, 22 losses, and 5 draws. But the point is, I think Tyson taking this fight on 2 weeks' notice after having what was at that point in his career a very challenging 10-round fight against John McDermott, I think he deserves a lot of credit, and I think you can put that one up there despite the opponent's bad record into the C tier. It's not a D tier performance. I would put that in the C tier. So moving on, number 10, we have Hans-Jörg Blasco. Now, Blasco in this fight at the time had a 9-3 record, but what stood out to me here from Tyson's point of view, he showed a good jab, and he got the guy out of there in round 1. So I think you probably put this one up near the top of Tyson's C-tier performances because he was facing a guy with a 9-3 record. He showed good use of his jab in this fight, and he got the guy out of there in a round. So for me, that goes near the top of his C-tier performances. Okay, now, this one is going to be interesting, and I'm curious to see in the comments how you guys rate this performance. But Tyson Fury against John McDermott 2, the rematch. Now, John McDermott in this fight was legitimately aggrieved that he had been robbed the first time out, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. But Tyson Fury proved the doubters wrong, and I am putting this in the A tier, not even the B tier, the A tier of Tyson Fury performances. The John McDermott rematch, to me, is actually one of Tyson Fury's best fights of his career, even though it was early on. And the reason why is because not only did John McDermott have a very good record at the time of the fight, he beat Tyson Fury the first time out, and Tyson Fury didn't rely on going to the judges' scorecards because there were judges in this fight, not the referee judging the verdict. But in this fight, Tyson Fury did not leave it to the judges. He went out there, he got the knockout, he knocked John McDermott down 3 times, and he really emphatically showed that he was the better fighter in this matchup. And that was at a time where people didn't know that Tyson Fury was going to go on and become a world champion like he has done. People at the time thought that Tyson Fury might not even become, depending on who you ask, some people felt that Tyson Fury might become English champion, British champion, European champion. Very few people, though, at this stage of his career were expecting him to go on and become world champion, face of boxing, and obviously in a few weeks challenge for the undisputed title. That wasn't really on people's thinking. So this was the first time, I think, where Tyson Fury put in a very good performance. The first A-tier performance for me from Tyson Fury in his career. Now, Rich Power, number 12. This is another one I'm going to put in the C tier. Now, this came off the heels of the John McDermott fight. It was a very one-sided win, but it was also an 8-round points decision against a guy who took the fight, and this is crucial, on only a week's notice. And I believe he also was actually fighting in MMA or training in MMA at the same time. So realistically, when you consider that Tyson Fury beat John McDermott as emphatically as he did, I think he probably could have got Rich Power out of there. He didn't do that. So for me, I'm putting this one in the C tier. Rich Power was undefeated at the time, but he wasn't a great fighter. Let's be honest about it. Now, Zach Page, number 13, another unanimous decision, another wide unanimous decision victory for Tyson Fury. This is also going into the C tier for me. It's going up near the top of the C tier. Let's put it here. But it is going to be notable and remembered for the time that Tyson Fury was cornered by the late, great Emanuel Steward. Now, Emanuel Steward, the guy who actually identified Tyson Fury early on as someone who could go on and potentially be the dominant heavyweight after Wladimir Klitschko and Vitaly Klitschko moved on after they retired. And a lot of that was to do with the fact that Tyson was actually in the Emanuel Steward camp at this point in time. He flew over to Detroit. He was training in the Kronk gym, and Emanuel Steward cornered him for this fight against Zach Page. It took place in Canada. It was the first time Tyson fought outside of the UK, outside of Ireland, and he was on the undercard, by the way, of Bernard Hopkins against Jean Pascal. And it was a performance that was very, I don't want to say impressive, but it was very professional. Tyson Fury looked good. The knock on this one would be that he didn't get the guy out of there because he only weighed 212 pounds in this fight. He was a cruiserweight, basically. So for all of you actually who watched the last Tyson Fury video I made, you'll remember I commented on the fact that Tyson Fury was saying that heavyweights who face cruiserweights, they always win. Well, in this fight, Tyson Fury faced another cruiserweight. He did win. He did look dominant, but he didn't actually get the guy out of there. He didn't actually get the stoppage. So it does show you that the cruiserweights don't always get blasted out in the way that Tyson Fury claims that they do. Sometimes they go the distance. Sometimes they cause him even more problems than that, as we'll see later on. But at number 14, Marcelo Nascimento. Now, this was a guy who fought out of Brazil. He was 13-0 at the time, and crucially, he had real KO power. But this was the problem. He also didn't have great defense. So Nascimento is going to go, I think, somewhere around the top of Tyson Fury's C-tier performances. But the thing with this fight is, basically Nascimento didn't have much in the way of defense. So even though he had power and he presented Tyson with problems that way, Tyson Fury actually had him down on the ground in round 1. He stopped him in round 5. Wasn't a great or difficult fight for him, but it was against a guy who had a lot of power. So again, C-tier performance from me. And we move on. Now this one is the first time I think Tyson Fury started to really and seriously get on people's radar as far as someone who just might be actually a serious British heavyweight prospect. Because if you guys remember at the time, David Haye was the man at heavyweight fighting out of the UK, and underneath him you basically had David Price, Derek Chisora, and Tyson Fury. So going into this fight against Derek Chisora, Tyson Fury was someone who I think a lot of people thought had potential, but because he was making a lot of big, bold statements, does that sound familiar? People weren't 100% sure what to make of him. And I think especially in the UK, having such a braggadocious fighter, it's not really what people were used to. And so as a result, I think Tyson Fury took a lot of heat for the comments that he was making, saying that he was going to do all these things, that he was going to be a great heavyweight. I think people struggled to take him seriously in that regard, but they shouldn't have done. So when he fought Derek Chisora had been ducked repeatedly by Wladimir Klitschko at this point. If you guys remember, Wladimir Klitschko was supposed to fight Derek Chisora. Emmanuel Stewart allegedly pulled Vlad out of the fight, and Derek Chisora was, I think, seen, at least by some people, as the favorite over Tyson Fury in this fight. But for me, this one goes into the A tier. It goes into the A tier above the John McDermott fight, the rematch. It was Tyson Fury's best win to date. Derek Chisora was 14-0 at the time. He hadn't suffered any losses. Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora had a very entertaining fight. If you guys haven't seen this one, this is the closest, most competitive of the 3 fights that they fought in the trilogy. If you only watch one, I encourage you to go back and watch this one. It's one of the more entertaining fights of Tyson Fury's career. It's back and forth, it's physical, but Tyson Fury ultimately outmuscles, he outboxes Derek Chisora, and it was, as I say, a very impressive win at the time. One of the best wins of Tyson Fury's career, in my opinion, still to this date in terms of entertainment and performance point of view. All right. So number 16, we have Nikolai Furtha, the 16th fight in Tyson Fury's career. He got Nikolai Furtha out of there in 5 rounds. Now, Tyson Fury was actually rocked in round 3 of this fight. And the thing is, Nikolai Furtha was not as good as Derek Chisora. So this one is going to go into the B tier for me. It was a win. It was a KO in 5. Furtha was probably a step up from some of the guys that Tyson was fighting in the early part of his career. But at the same time, I would say he was a step down from Derek Chisora. So I don't think he gets as much credit for this one. Now, here we go. Number 17. You guys know this fight, I'm sure, because the Nevin Pikic fight is the one in which Tyson Fury was actually knocked down. And he was dropped by a guy who had 5 KOs in his entire career. So Tyson Fury didn't take this fight seriously. If you guys remember at the time as well, he was promoted by Mick Hennessy, who was having trouble getting Tyson serious opponents that were basically going to be high-level names. He fought Derek Chisora, and then after that, with Nikolai Furtha, Nevin Pikic, there was a run of guys who essentially weren't the biggest tests in the world, respectfully. And Nevin Pikic was brought in, given very little chance to beat Tyson Fury at the time. He was brought in as a guy who was just going to get knocked over. He did ultimately get TKO'd in 3, but the reality is Tyson Fury should have dominated this fight, and instead he got dropped. He got dropped, as I say, by a guy with only 5 KOs in his entire career. Not good. Not a good look. For me, this is one of the worst performances of Tyson Fury's career. In fact, we're going to see later on, but this might be the worst performance of Tyson Fury's whole career because he didn't take this one seriously, and he really had no business being in danger of losing to Nevin Pikic. So I'm putting that one in the D tier at the bottom of the list. For me, up to this point, this was the worst performance of Tyson Fury's entire career. A big disappointment. Now, number 18, he fought Martin Rogan. This fight took place, if I remember correctly, in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And I believe this was when Tyson Fury won the Irish heavyweight title. Now, Martin Rogan was a taxi driver at the time, and it's appropriate because Tyson Fury was being criticized by some people after this fight, after the Pikic fight, after the Furtha fight, and also, actually, in fairness, Mick Hennessy was being criticized as well for putting Tyson Fury in against a bunch of cab drivers, and literally Martin Rogan in this case was actually a cab driver. Now, I'm going to put this one in the B tier. I think this is a B tier win from Tyson Fury. He was sleepwalking early, but you started to see some interesting things here. He, for example, fought out of the southpaw stance. This was one of the first time, might have even been the first time we saw him do that, but Tyson Fury was showing some technical improvements here. Rogan was a tough guy as well. He had a lot of heart, but Tyson Fury had the better skills. He ultimately got the stoppage in 5. He just wasn't really taking this fight seriously early on. He was sleepwalking a little bit. It was a good performance. Tyson Fury won the British, English, and the Irish heavyweight title, or rather, he won the Irish heavyweight title in this fight to complete his collection of all of the belts, if I remember correctly. He won the Commonwealth title in there as well at some point. I can't remember which fight that was, so you guys let me know in the comments which fight Tyson won the Commonwealth title, but he won all 4 of those belts, won the Irish title in this fight. So in his 19th performance, this was where you started to see, I think, the Peter Fury effect really kick in for Tyson. So Vinny Matalone, again, he did probably fall into the cab driver tier of opponents, but this was a very disciplined performance from Tyson. He got the stoppage in 5 rounds, and for me, this is a B tier victory. Probably Tyson Fury's best B tier fight, though, for me, is this next one. So I'll just drop that in the B tier right away at the top. We'll see how we get on. But this one against Kevin Johnson. Now, Kevin Johnson at this point in time was considered to be a skilled boxer. There were some people even who compared him to being a heavyweight version of Floyd Mayweather. But Kevin Johnson, which, you know, it sounds silly now, and Kevin Johnson obviously didn't go on and do a ton with his career after that, although he did actually fight, I believe, last year in Russia, which is kind of crazy. But be that as it may, Kevin Johnson at this point in time was actually seen as one of the more slick, defensive, and hard-to-hit heavyweights. But Tyson Fury dominated him in here. He looked very skilled, very slick. It was a boring fight, I won't lie. It wasn't an amazing performance, but Tyson Fury dominated Kevin Johnson, who, like I say, was seen at that point in time as being a pretty decent guy. And he had Peter Fury in his corner. This was the fight where, if you read the forums at the time, people were starting to say Tyson Fury against Klitschko is not actually a crazy fight. And that was the minority still. Most people kind of laughed at the idea, but minority of people were starting to get on board the Fury hype train a little bit at this point because Kevin Johnson was seen, as I say, as a decent journeyman gatekeeper level heavyweight who had slick skills. And I think people were impressed by how Tyson Fury dominated him and the skills that he actually showed off. So that was one of the better B tier performances from Tyson Fury at that point in time. Now, you guys might be surprised that I am going to put Tyson Fury's win, over Steve Cunningham into the A tier. Now, this was a fight where he got dropped by a cruiserweight. So why is it in the A tier? Well, the reason why is because Tyson Fury was going over to the United States for the first time in this fight. He'd only ever boxed outside of the UK and Ireland once. That was in Canada. And in this fight, he was facing a guy, Steve Cunningham, who again was seen at that time as being quite a skilled fighter in the heavyweight division. Yes, he was a former cruiserweight, but he was also trained by the same trainer as Bernard Hopkins, and he was seen as a real legitimate threat for Tyson Fury at this time. On top of that, if memory serves correctly, Tyson Fury had Clifton Mitchell in his corner for this one, not his Uncle Peter, not his dad, because both of them couldn't get visas to come to the United States. And on top of that, this was his debut headlining a show at the theater at Madison Square Garden, not the main MSG, it has to be said, but still, he was headlining a show in New York. He was still a young guy at this point in time. People forget that as well. I mean, he was way younger when he was doing this than most of the heavyweight prospects are at this point in time, who are further on in their careers even than Tyson Fury was. So Tyson Fury at this point in time was facing a serious guy in Steve Cunningham with a serious trainer in a foreign country, in a big venue, under a lot of pressure, without his uncle and his father in his corner, and he performed, I think, very admirably given the circumstances. When he got dropped, he got up and he eventually stopped Steve Cunningham in the 7th round. He could have folded. He didn't. He could have felt sorry for himself. All of these things could have gone wrong. And I think you find out a lot about people by how they handle themselves when things do go wrong through adversity, more than you do if he just gone in there and bulldozed Steve Cunningham, got him out of there quickly. So I think when you consider all of the things that were going against him in this fight, then Steve Cunningham, this performance, actually one of the more impressive of Tyson's career up to this point. So that's in the A tier for me. Joey A. Bell, fight number 22. Joey A. Bell got knocked down 4 times in this fight by Tyson Fury. So for that reason, this goes into the B tier. But it has to be said, despite the fact that Tyson Fury had a dominant performance here, Joey A. Bell wasn't a great fighter, respectfully. And so I think you can also not rate that one too highly, even though he was so dominant. I don't think that one counts as an A tier performance. But what does, although I would say it's probably, I'm going to put this one actually controversially, I think, for some of you, below the Steve Cunningham fight, and that is Tyson Fury's second win over Derek Chisora. Now, this fight was a dominant performance for Tyson Fury. It's an A tier performance from Tyson Fury. He looked even more convincing than he did against Derek Chisora in the first fight. I would argue, however, that Derek Chisora was already not quite as, or at least at this point in time, because Derek Chisora's career has kind of gone up and down and up and down, and he's had peaks, then he's had periods where he's looked like he was maybe on the decline, and then he's actually come up again and resurrected his career. At this point in time, though, Tyson Fury was a level above Derek Chisora. He showed it in the ring here. He was the favorite in this fight going into it. And Derek Chisora also had lost to both Vitaly Klitschko and David Haye. He got knocked out by David Haye and technically lost to Robert Helenius as well, but I don't count that because he won that fight in the ring as far as I'm concerned. But Derek Chisora against Tyson Fury, the rematch, that was an A-tier victory for Tyson, but I would say it's actually below the, even though it's probably a more emphatic victory, I would still put it below the first Derek Chisora fight, just based off of the fact that Tyson, I think, had gone up and Derek Chisora had maybe dropped just a little bit, and Tyson went into that fight as the favorite. So Christian Hammer, number 24. Now, Christian Hammer, if you guys only saw him against Dillian Whyte, you might not realize that Christian Hammer at this point in time was actually a semi-serious contender. He was in the ring with a bunch of decent names throughout his career, and he was in a lot better shape in this fight than he was against Dillian Whyte recently. So, totally different guy. Now, here's the thing. This was also a very boring fight, which is why I'm putting this one into the B tier. It was a boring fight, but it was a win against an opponent who was, as I say, at this point in time, a decent-ish name. Tyson Fury, though, he had been robbed of 2 fights against David Haye by this point in time. So he, I think, was in good shape considering the fact that he had been preparing for David Haye and the fight didn't materialize, preparing for David Haye a second time. Fight falls through, but Tyson kept himself in good shape. Christian Hammer, though, did not want to engage. Tyson Fury engaged in his fair share of holding and grabbing, it has to be said. So this was not a boring, or rather it was a boring fight. It wasn't an entertaining fight. I wouldn't recommend to go and watch this one unless you want to have an easier time falling asleep, quite frankly. Tyson Fury here, not one of his most exciting fights. Christian Hammer didn't help, but it was a good performance. It was an 8th round stoppage. So again, B tier. Okay, number 25, Tyson Fury against Wladimir Klitschko. Now, this fight is going to be, I'm sure, a contender for best fight of Tyson Fury's career with some people, but I'm sure some of you guys also have probably gone backwards in your minds and redirected this fight into maybe a worse performance than what it actually was, based off of what I believe, at least, is the misconception that Wladimir Klitschko was washed up at this point in time, that he was too old. See, I don't think that was the case. I think if you guys go back and actually look at how people perceived this fight going into it, very few people gave Wladimir Klitschko any serious chance of being upset here. They thought Tyson Fury was going to get beaten, and Wladimir Klitschko was not seen as on the decline prior to this fight. He'd also had a dominant victory over David Haye, who at that point in time, I think a lot of people still put above Tyson Fury. A lot of people thought that this fight was too soon for Tyson Fury, and very few actually picked him to win this one. When he did, and then obviously had that 3-year absence from the ring, Wladimir Klitschko only had one fight after that, which was against Anthony Joshua, where he actually performed very well. That was one of the best performances of Vlad's career. But Tyson Fury dominated this fight. Now, Wladimir Klitschko, it has to be said, did not engage. He really didn't look like he deserved or wanted to win this fight. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was, quite frankly, intimidated by Tyson Fury. He was thrown off his game. And you can see from the fact that Vlad tried to throw all of this gamesmanship at Tyson. He tried to come out with all of this crazy stuff. He tried to have the ring canvas artificially thickened to slow Tyson Fury down. You only have to look at what Tyson Fury's feet looked like after this fight to see all of the different tricks that Vlad and his camp were trying to throw here. But Tyson Fury overcame everything. And don't forget, at this point in time, Germany was seen as a very imposing place to go, a very difficult place to go and get a decision. A lot of non-German-based fighters had gone over there and they'd been robbed on the scorecards. It was seen as a place where the judges would favor the German fighter. And Wladimir Klitschko, even though he's Ukrainian, was based in Germany, was a huge star in Germany at the time, was selling out arenas with 50, 60,000 people. It's an impressive performance. So this is an S-tier performance from Tyson Fury. I don't go along with the narrative that Vlad was washed up. I think this was one of the better performances in the heavyweight division in the last 20 years, quite frankly, in the sense that you had a challenger who was given very little chance of winning the fight against a dominant champion who hadn't lost in a decade, who was at that point considered by some people to have a chance to go on and break Joe Louis's record, but Tyson Fury put a stop to that. So an S-tier performance from Tyson Fury. Sefer Seferi. Now, this fight was the first fight that Tyson Fury had back after a 3-year layoff. Now, that layoff was due to a combination of Tyson Fury failing drug tests and also due to his own out-of-the-ring behavior. Not a good situation. It's been well documented, everything that happened. And Tyson Fury, I think for all of the discredit that I've given to him over his recent behavior, deserves a ton of praise for what he was able to do here. He got himself back into tremendous shape. He turned his life around. I'm sure everyone around him at this point in time was tremendously proud of what he was able to do just to get back in the ring. Even if he never had gone on and reclaimed the heavyweight title, I think a lot of people were proud of Tyson Fury just for getting back into shape, turning his life around, and getting back in the ring. He also had Ben Davison in his corner for this fight as well. Ben Davison really was an unknown quantity to most people. Now, this one's going to go in the B tier. I'm going to put it at the top of the B tier for me because of the fact that Tyson had to endure all of those obstacles outside of the ring just in order to get back in time for this fight. So that's one of Tyson Fury's, maybe even Tyson Fury's best B-tier performance for me of his career because of what he had to do just to get back in the ring. So number 27, Francesco Pianetta. This was a dominant win for Tyson Fury. So it's going to be a B-tier fight, but I'm going to put it in lower down in the B-tier because of the fact that Pianetta was a limited opponent. Tyson won a unanimous decision, but that got him ready for the fight against Deontay Wilder. Now, Deontay Wilder against Tyson Fury. This, for me, top 3 performance in Tyson Fury's career. Not a controversial take, but where I think this one might be controversial to some people, I'm actually going to put this one above the Wladimir Klitschko fight, and possibly I'm actually going to put this one above the Wladimir Klitschko fight and possibly the most impressive performance of Tyson Fury's entire career. And the reason why is because I think people sometimes have a way of forgetting how things were viewed at the time and what Tyson Fury had to go through in order to be able to get in the ring here. You see, because a lot of people were saying when he was massively overweight, when he was out of the ring, that Tyson Fury's career is over. He will never come back. When he did, when he got back into the ring, when he fought Pianetta, when he fought Sefer Seferi, I don't think people really believed that he was going to go on and be able to beat Deontay Wilder. And the thing is, Tyson Fury did all of this while losing a ton of weight. He was in a weight cut basically the entire time, which most heavyweights shouldn't be, because if you are training, and if any of you guys train with weights or do any kind of marathon running, any kind of activity where you have to cut weight or compete in bodybuilding, anything like that, you guys know that when you are doing that, you do not have the energy to train properly, and you don't have the energy to spar and train properly for a fight when you're trying to lose a ton of weight, at least not compared to a guy, Deontay Wilder, who's not having to do that. If anything, Deontay Wilder was probably eating as much as he wanted because he never had any problem with being in shape. Deontay Wilder came in actually really light for a guy his size. Tyson Fury that wasn't the case. He was having to be very strict. He was having to be hungry, I'm sure, all of the time in training camp, and it's not fun. You don't have energy, and you're facing a guy who at this point in time was an enormously feared puncher. So put all of that together, most people, including myself, felt that Deontay Wilder would beat Tyson Fury in this fight. But I think what really puts this one over the top for me is that 12th round where Tyson Fury was put on the canvas. Probably for me, that is one of the greatest recoveries in the entire history of boxing. If we're talking about a single punch, putting a guy on the canvas, it looks like he is out of there, and then he sits up, and then he actually goes on and wins the rest of the round in actually almost a miraculous fashion. So because of really what Tyson Fury was able to do and had to go through just to get to that point, and then to go into the ring against the most feared puncher in the world at that point in time, and then actually produce that comeback in the 12th round and arguably win the fight on the judges, or rather, he didn't win the fight on the scorecards, but arguably deserved to. That to me is actually more impressive than the Klitschko fight, believe it or not. So that to me is, up to this point in time, Tyson Fury's most impressive performance to date. Now, I'm actually going to put the Tom Schwartz fight in the A tier as well. I'm going to put it at the bottom of the A tier just because it was a dominant Tyson Fury win, and I think that he pretty much didn't need to do a lot, and he did what he needed to do against an opponent that essentially shouldn't have really been in the ring, but it was a dominant fight. So I'm just going to put that into the A tier, even though Tyson Fury wasn't really tested a lot. And the reason why I want to do that is because I have another fight that I would like to put into the B tier, and that is going to be Otto Wallin. Now, Otto Wallin against Tyson Fury, let's put it around here, sort of towards the bottom of the B tier. Tyson Fury against Otto Wallin, but Otto Wallin gave Tyson Fury a much tougher test, I think, than a lot of people expected. Considering what Tyson was able to do with Deontay Wilder, this fight, I think, has to be viewed as a disappointment. Yes, he did win the fight deservedly on the scorecards. Yes, he did dominate, but he did actually put himself in more danger of losing this fight than he needed to. So from my point of view, that's a B-tier performance from Tyson. Deontay Wilder against Tyson Fury, the rematch. Fight number 2. This fight for me is the most impressive win of Tyson Fury's career, but only by a small margin over the first fight with Deontay Wilder. Now, the reason why, even though I just said all those superlatives about the first Wilder fight, but the reason why I like this one is because Tyson Fury actually won the fight, number 1. So I feel like it's difficult to rank it below the fight that he actually drew on the scorecards. And in fairness, I actually scored that fight a draw on second watching, it has to be said. But Deontay Wilder in the second fight, Tyson Fury under Sugar Hill Stewart reinvented his style completely. He looked like a prime Lennox Lewis in here. He did something that very few people believed was possible, which was to actually knock out Deontay Wilder. I think everyone at the time who was anyone thought that Tyson needed to box on the back foot, with the exception of his dad, himself, and his team, Sugar Hill Stewart, of course, included. I'm sure some of you guys as well thought that. But the vast, vast majority of people, including myself, thought that Tyson Fury needed to box on the back foot. He didn't do that. He knocked Deontay Wilder out, arguably derailed Wilder's whole career. Arguably, Deontay didn't recover from this to this day. He got rid of Mark Breland in what I consider to be a very low and cowardly act. He blamed everyone else for this performance, but he did all of that because he was so dominated by Tyson Fury that he couldn't get over it. He couldn't accept that he was actually exposed in such a brutal fashion. And Tyson Fury, I think, had in this fight his most impressive performance of his career. So then we move on to Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder 3, the trilogy fight. That's the number 4 performance from Tyson Fury. So yes, he did beat Deontay for a third time. Yes, he knocked him out for a second consecutive time. But Tyson Fury, I think most of you will agree, and comment in the comments if you don't, but I think most of you will agree that Tyson looked worse in this fight than he did in the second one. And for that reason, I'm putting this one at number 3, especially because of the fact that Tyson Fury was doing his best to convince the public that he was going to be fighting Anthony Joshua instead, even though he knew in the back of his mind, I'm sure, the whole time that the Deontay Wilder rematch or trilogy fight was actually what was going to be happening. So he had the whole time to be preparing for Wilder. He wasn't in the best shape for this fight compared to the second one. He clearly didn't take it quite as seriously. It was still a dominant performance, but Tyson nearly lost it there in the early part of the fight when he got put down. And I think for that reason, you have to put it below the other 2 Wilder fights and the Klitschko fight, because it was the one that he came the closest to losing, but it's also the one that really he should have probably dominated the most, and he didn't do that. So number 33, Tyson Fury against Dillian Whyte. Now this one to me is an A-tier performance. Dillian Whyte was a good fighter. I'm going to put it, though, actually below the John McDermott fight and the first Derek Chisora fight. And the reason why is because Dillian Whyte, even though he got KO'd by Tyson Fury in 7 rounds, I believe Dillian Whyte was washed up at this point. This was not the same guy who fought Anthony Joshua. This was not the same guy who was seen as a very dangerous opponent earlier on in his career. Dillian Whyte had problems with inactivity, some of it due to his own making, failing drug tests, suspensions. Dillian Whyte also never really refined his footwork to the level that it should have been at. He never, I think, ironed out his skills to the level that he could have. And Tyson Fury exposed all of that in this fight. Dillian Whyte knocked out by Povetkin as well. He did avenge that, but Tyson Fury, I think, beat a version of Dillian Whyte who was close to the end of his career here. And so for that reason, I don't think this one belongs in the S tier of his career. Now, Tyson Fury against Derek Chisora, number 3. Now, this fight, I think, is the very bottom of the A tier wins from Tyson Fury. Very bottom, bordering, frankly, on the B tier. If I had extra space here, I would probably put this fight with Derek Chisora 3 into the B tier, because if Dillian Whyte was washed up at this stage in his career, Tyson Fury had no business being in the ring against Derek Chisora. It was a blatant duck to avoid fighting Anthony Joshua and fighting Oleksandr Usyk. Tyson Fury should not have been in the ring against Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora, who I used to rate quite highly, I liked him a lot. He didn't deserve a title shot at this point in time either. A fight which, I'll be honest, I was so annoyed about at the time that I didn't even watch it live, just because I thought it was a complete joke that it was happening when it was not the fight that the public wanted to see. If you remember afterwards, Tyson had this big confrontation with Usyk and he was giving it the big end. Still hasn't gotten in the ring with the guy, but this was where I started to really start to lose a little bit of respect for Tyson Fury when this circus fight happened. He got the win, but that's about all you can say, I think, about that one, because Derek Chisora was washed up over the hill. And if you guys, and here's one other thing. If you guys don't believe that Derek Chisora was literally put on to sell tickets, go and watch the Netflix documentary At Home with the Furies. There's literally a scene in that documentary, I don't know if you guys have seen this, where Tyson, I believe it's his dad, John, and Ben Shalom are all sitting around in a restaurant. I think it's a restaurant, or maybe it's in an arena in Manchester, and they're literally discussing who they should put on as the opponent. And Tyson Fury literally is talking with Ben Shalom, and they're talking about, we just need someone who's going to do a lot of trash talking, who's going to sell tickets. And the inference being, they wanted someone who isn't going to pose much of a threat, but who they can basically go back and forth and have a bunch of showmanship, press conference build-up, all of this type of thing. So that was the whole thinking going into this fight. And like I say, if you don't believe me, go watch the Netflix documentary At Home with the Furies. There's a scene in Manchester with Tyson Fury, his dad John, and Ben Shalom, where this conversation literally takes place in front of the cameras. It's not just me making it up. And you can see what this fight was even from before it was officially announced. So Derek Chisora against Tyson Fury, the bottom of the A tier. I'd put it in the B tier, but I don't have room. Tyson Fury's worst performance of his career. For me, the worst performance of his career is still going to be the Nevin Pikic fight. But second to that is going to be this one against Francis Ngannou, a fight that Tyson Fury, in my view, lost. And I know a lot of you guys view he lost it as well. I scored this fight 95-94 in favor of Francis Ngannou because of the knockdown. But this one was so disappointing because Tyson, for all of the talk before the fight, all of the talk that he was going to go in there and he was taking this fight super seriously, he wasn't. He wasn't taking it seriously at all. It was a blatant attempt to try and make as much money as possible before fighting Oleksandr Usyk. It was an embarrassing performance from supposedly the best heavyweight in the world. And as we saw in the Anthony Joshua fight, Francis Ngannou had a lot of holes in his game that could and should have been exploited by Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury should have been able to outbox him comfortably on the back foot, and he didn't do it because Tyson's pride actually meant that he wasn't able to, because he was afraid of being called essentially a coward if he didn't come forward, and that was how he was able to walk into Francis Ngannou's best work. So Francis Ngannou exposed Tyson Fury's poor preparation in this fight, and I believe that was the second worst fight of his career, with the only worst one being the Nevin Pikic fight. Now, the Pikic fight, Tyson actually won, but the reason I've put that at the bottom is because Francis Ngannou at least was a UFC heavyweight champion, the baddest man on the planet, a very feared fighter, bigger and stronger than, well, at least stronger than Tyson Fury, a guy who had real legitimate knockout power, and Tyson had, in theory, a full 12-week training camp to prepare for this fight. Nevin Pikic really didn't have any of those tools that Tyson Fury had, or rather that Francis Ngannou had. So even though Tyson Fury won that fight, I think Tyson Fury's poor preparation and the fact that he got put down and nearly stopped by Nevin Pikic, that to me is still the worst performance of his career. But you guys can disagree in the comments as well. Who do you guys think was the worst performance of his career? Is it Pikic, is it Francis Ngannou, or is it one of the other fights? So last but not least, this is an interesting one because this fight hasn't happened yet. So this is theory. So for anyone in the comments who's saying that the fight hasn't happened, I do understand that. So this is a prediction, just to be clear. I think Tyson Fury's fight against Oleksandr Usyk is going to go into the A tier. I am predicting, let's put it above the Chisora fight, this is going to be one of Tyson Fury's better performances. Is it going to be as good as his greatest performances? That to me is where I'm a little bit on the fence. Either Tyson is going to come in and he is going to put on one of the great performances of his entire career, possibly even above the second Wilder fight, the first Wilder fight, and the Klitschko fight. But I believe Tyson is going to get his act together. I think the shame and embarrassment that he suffered against Francis Ngannou and the public criticism that he's been enduring for the last 2 years, much of it his own making, is going to mean that we get one of the best performances of Tyson Fury's career. My prediction, I think we're going to see something about the level, maybe just a little bit below what we got in the third Deontay Wilder fight, which in my opinion is Tyson Fury's fourth best performance, making my prediction that Usyk will be Tyson Fury's fifth best performance. I believe Tyson has deteriorated slightly because of the fact that he hasn't been taking his career seriously. He's been in and out of retirement. He has not been training properly. He's probably been drinking and eating at times when he shouldn't. We saw the performance against Ngannou. I believe he's going to put it all together and improve substantially, but I also don't believe you can just live a unprofessional sporting lifestyle outside of the ring indefinitely and have no consequences against the consummate professional like Oleksandr Usyk. So in my view, this performance against Tyson Fury is not going to match the other four, or at least the top three of his career, and instead is going to be competing with that third fight against Deontay Wilder. But let's see, number one, if I'm right or wrong, and number two, where does Tyson Fury, or rather does Tyson Fury actually do enough to beat Oleksandr Usyk in this fight? So that is my take, guys. This has been a long one, but I hope you guys have enjoyed it, at least enjoyed parts of it, and I'd love to hear your take on this one in the comments. Which of these Tyson Fury performances do you think are the best? Which of them do you think are the worst? What do you agree with my rankings on? What do you disagree? And when it comes to the Usyk fight, how do you think Tyson is going to do in that one? So there's plenty of things to discuss here. I'd love to get into all of this with you guys in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If there's any more of these types of rankings videos as well you'd like to see me make, let me know about those in the comments as well. Thank you, as always, for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next video.